try to get a little bit more of that light out.
So it's a privilege to have Rick Weible of Midwest Swamp Watch. He has a lot of hard data to give with us tonight to share with you all. After all, we've been told that everything's totally fine with the last election, the selection that we just went through of this potato. Everything in Minnesota, totally fine. Nothing to see here, folks. Return to your homes. Move along, everyone. Nothing to see here. Ladies and gentlemen, MidwestSwampWatch.com's Rick Weible. Give us some real information. After all, everybody here locally is telling us everything's A-OK in Olmsted County. Everything's fine.
Yeah, sorry, Wes. I hate to report they've been misled. It's not quite true. Minnesotans deserve better than what they received. I'll just kind of give you a kind of a quick overview. So we certified the election on November 24th. So the state canvassing board basically said, all right, seal of approval. We've got an election and here's who you guys voted for. Well, kind of. So I get the data from the Secretary of State's office on November 29th's data set. And right away, I'm like, whoa, 38.9% of the overall ballots aren't connected to a voter.
Well, 38.9% of the ballots are not connected to an actual voter?
Right. So, but that's a little bit of a disconnect. So state law says the counties have until December 15th to enter in the voter histories, because we're looking at the voter histories of active voters. But there's a conflict in there where it talks about the absentee ballots, because right in the statutes there for the absentee ballots for kind of the ballot boards, it says that once they receive an absentee ballot, they must immediately enter it into the statewide voter registration system. It doesn't talk about like a separate module over here, like or another spot over here. It just says statewide voter registration system. So a couple things kind of come into play. So Mr. Simon will say, well, you know what, you're misinterpreting what we do there. Let the experts kind of handle it. My emphasis there. But I'm kind of like, okay, so you're putting the absentee ballots into this absentee ballot accepted area? If you've received an absentee ballot, why wouldn't you automatically update the histories?
I suppose because if you don't update the histories, the absentee ballot can better be accepted.
Huh. Okay. It's just like a make work program. So, I mean, from a technical standpoint, I just call garbage. So you're willing to live with this type of disconnect. And so from a professional standards, it doesn't cut mustard for me. It just doesn't work. But I wanted to kind of get to you guys some of the weird numbers that don't quite add up, and they're smaller for Olmsted County. And so either you're really good at cheating or it's really not that bad. So I'm open to both suggestions.
Everything is A-OK in Olmsted County. I mean, we've had our politicians, just to recap, we've had numerous politicians accept that everything is A-OK, and I'm going to give them an opportunity to respond. They've been telling people out there at the meetings, everything's fine, and people are like, well, but we heard there were problems. No. Everything's just absolutely okay.
So, actually, I'm gonna, I hope that they'll listen to some of this parts. So we really had two separate elections in Minnesota, and so let's think about the old traditional way that most Republicans probably voted. They probably went to the precinct caucuses. It showed up on the day of the election because, they have that calendar from the bank and it only shows one election day. So they're not going to vote absentee. So they're going to show up on election day because that's what the calendar says. And they show up at that precinct caucus. There's party balance there. The election judges do a great job of observation, making sure things are running right. And that happens at 4,100 locations across the state. But the difference is that other election, there's 46 days to that election, And all those ballots go right into the center county office where there may or may not be party ballots, but we have to trust them that they hired employees and they retrained them somehow in a short amount of time to be nonpartisan.
Yeah.
Right. Sure.
You trust the party balance and the observation,
Right,
Yeah,
right. So,
sure.
if you believe in that mysticism, that's great. I'm happy for you. But I don't, because I know how people operate. I know how I operate. I admit that I'm a partisan, which I admit to right away in my affidavits. So, Mr. Simon, I do appreciate that you use state money to investigate me and have somebody go through my Facebook posts to tell
Wow.
the court that I was a partisan. That was fantastic at taxpayer dollars when I already admitted that in my affidavit. So you didn't need to
Yeah.
go there.
Seems obvious to me
But
since yeah, it's obvious.
so it's like, at least I'm an honest broker when I talk about it. So I understand my biases and I will point out those biases. But I think for average Minnesotans, I don't think they're aware that the ballot boards have changed elections in Minnesota. So when you're used to the precinct caucuses, or sorry, the precincts way of voting at 4,100 locations across the state of Minnesota, you have local control, local oversight, and local accountability, with those election judges. They pretty much know that nobody lives at 125 Main Street because it's in a small area that pretty much everybody knows what houses are empty, which ones actually have new people that moved in, et cetera. And whereas in the county level, where you only have 87 counties across the state, we get into weird separation issues where somebody may be from one part of the county and never visited the other part of the county. And so you have potentially less familiarity as to what's happening within the county. So we lose that local control, local accountability, and local oversight. And so it becomes more disconnected from a voter perspective and a voter standpoint. So I think that process part, voters should really question that. So with 46 days, does that potentially open up the window for fraud or bending the curve? And I will submit yes. And we actually see that. I can't say everything is fraud, because actually some of the stuff that they do is actually valid in state statute. So I'll give you a couple quick ones. So in the precincts, when you're there, you can vouch for up to 8 people, right? You can vouch for 8 of your neighbors and stuff like that. But if you are part of a nursing home, a VA center, an employee, or a women's shelter, or a worker at a developmentally disabled place, you can actually vouch for unlimited.
Wow.
And that's state law, so I can't call that fraud because it's legal.
Yeah.
So, but some of the stuff that they didn't catch and pursue, we are working with some counties now to pursue those voters that voted out of PO boxes, because that's against the law. Also, those voters that voted out of UPS stores, that's also against the law. We are also pursuing the voters that voted more than once. And so what's interesting about this election is we created this weird issue with the consent decrees that allowed the absentee ballots to be received all the way through November 10th.
Oh, yeah.
So even though the election was November 3rd, we created this weird quasi crazy environment. So part of that asterisk is that there was a belief that the United States Post Office was under dire pressure because of COVID, and that there was lateness in mail and stuff like that. So I understand where they were coming at in an argument standpoint, but what was interesting is they relaxed it so much that they didn't hold the standard for the postmarks, which was essentially critical. And it will be interesting to review that kind of after the fact. But I kind of want to give you some Olmsted County facts here. And what's interesting is that none of the numbers really match, and it's kind of disconcerting. So these are all Secretary of State's Steve Simon numbers. These aren't numbers I'm creating.
We're not making these up. We're not making these up as we go along here, right? And I was astonished to hear, COVID was the excuse for using absentee ballots to begin with, and pushing absentee ballots. We have screenshots of politicians pushing absentee ballots in Olmsted County. Absolutely
Right.
essential that you not show up on election day. Do it from home, distance.
Yeah. And see,
So the
I
promo campaign, yeah.
yeah, and there's
So
something beautiful about showing up on an election day. That's part of the ceremony, but just the kind of the wow factor of seeing your fellow Americans, fellow Minnesotans showing up in your neck of the woods, voting for your local candidates, voting for the national candidates. There's something precious and special about that, and I really hope
yes,
we don't lose that sense of it, because that is truly an American type of an event. Sure, other countries do it, but it's it's really special. And this whole mail-in piece and this
uh-huh.
electronic stuff, I'm really not for, because I think there's something special about showing up, waiting in line, logging
Yes.
into the green bar books if you have that opportunity, and seeing those election judges and just kind of honoring that whole, process that you showed up that day. Um, and kind of an honor for those who fought for us to be able to have
Yes.
those freedoms. And so I kind of think that, you know, that whole thing of United We Stand kind of means something when we're there at the polling place. United We Stand together. We may decide differently, but you know what? Together we decide the fate of our country, our county, and our communities. And so I think there's something beautiful about that.
Right. It's a
Uh,
cultural tradition. The
yeah,
concept of election day is as precious as, let's say, a civic, religious, national holiday such as, a religious holiday like Easter, Fourth of
yep,
July, Thanksgiving, Christmas, President's Day, Flag Day. All of these traditions were canceled because of COVID, and Election Day was one more event in our calendar, our cultural. It's a manifestation of who we are as a people.
yep.
One more thing which had to be canceled because of COVID. So you're chomping at the bit to tell us about Olmstead, and I can't wait to hear. Everything was absolutely a-okay. The head of the BPOU, all of our politicians are telling us everything. What really happened, according to the Secretary of State's actual data.
So what's interesting is
Yeah.
when we look at the Secretary of State's data, so the official precinct spreadsheet that the Minnesota Secretary of State has there shows that there was 91,864 ballots that were cast. But then when we look at the state canvassing board, when we look at the absentee ballot ledger, it shows that there were 52,112 absentee ballots cast. However, on the Secretary of State's web tracking site, it shows that there was 52,315, so 203 extra.
That's amazing because some of the elections were so close in Olmsted County.
Correct.
Senator Carla Nelson, Representative Nels Pearson,
Right.
Senator Dave Senjum. You would think that the Democrats would be upset about having lost at such a small margin to Republicans. Why wouldn't the Democrats challenge this? And none of them have.
Right. And
Oh,
I and
sorry.
it would and so we do have theories as to why they may not have, because we're seeing that in some of the data. And at the live event, we'll show you those. So you'll want to stay tuned for January 19th when I come out and show you some of this. But here's the interesting thing. So when we look at November 29th, when we bring the focus back to that seminal date, of those absentee ballots, I can't match up 1,548 voters. Those ballots aren't connected
So
at that point in
the
time.
county only has 91,000 votes. If you can't match up almost 2,000 votes to a voter, you're missing nearly 1.5% of the vote.
Right.
Without,
And so
there's no.
in Carla Nelson's race, where she won by, I think, 909 votes, that would have been a legitimate question for the Democrats to say, hey, these ballots aren't all connected.
Uh-oh. I wonder why the
Right.
Democrats wouldn't ask if Carla Nelson's election was totally okay. Sort of an interesting point. But I mean, that on top of how many missing absentee ballots there were, this data comes from you as well. From Secretary Simon's
Yep.
website.
Yeah, so
There's,
the so
am
that
I,
November 29th data, that is the active voter registrations at that time. Now, remember, they say that they have until December 15th to do all of the voter histories, but I would submit, well, wait a minute, you already have the data from when you must immediately enter in the absentee ballots. Why would there be any discrepancies whatsoever? There shouldn't be.
I can't imagine any reasons why there would be discrepancies in that data. Would you have any explanation for or possibilities? What?
I do actually. So when we look at the deadline for the court challenges to file an election contest, you have until December 4th. So it's interesting that statutorily they have all the way till December 15th to complete the data. So in reality, when we're filing our cases, there's 40% of the data missing that we can't see 40% of the data where there's potentially dead voters. There's voters that are felons. There's voters that are voting out of mailboxes, et cetera. Voters who really didn't vote, multiple votes. All of this dystopia can be hidden away from the evidence gathering. And so this is where we really need to reform the deadlines within the state of Minnesota to make sure that we have truly honest elections. Right now, the system is hedged against candidates who are in close races, as well as the public from being able to do any type of due diligence to make sure that their vote counted. So you would potentially have 40% of Minnesotans out there who would look at this data right after the state canvassing board met and feel uncomfortable that maybe their vote didn't count because you certified an election before you could prove to me that you got my ballot.
Mm-hmm. Well, why would anybody not have faith in the system that's so perfect? I mean, it's there must be some problems with us because maybe we didn't fill out the form correctly, or we didn't bubble in the correct box. We don't really know how many ballots were filled in incorrectly, do we?
We have some stats, but the problem is that a lot of these ballot boards, what they try to do is quote unquote adjudicate the ballots, or they'll try to figure out voter intent. So even if a ballot, I mean, this happens. We've all received mail where you don't know how, whatever that story is for that piece of parcel that came in, you're interested, but maybe not, because you'll see footprints all over it. It's crumpled, tears, whatever. And that happens. There's a low percentage of that, but the ballot boards will have to try and meticulously open this thing up. And then because it's obviously not going to feed into these scanning systems, they will, in essence, try to hand create a ballot so that that voter intent can still be read.
So an absentee ballot is because the voter's not there. An absentee ballot is problematic on a number of levels.
Correct. And so that's one of them. And so whereas if you were there at the polling place, likely your ballot's not going to be exposed to the elements because you're in a building. So you don't have to worry about that. But with an absentee ballot and even these boxes now potentially being outside, I mean, you've got winter, right on you. So and fall and winter transition. So you've got rain, snow, sleet, wind, everything else that could potentially happen, mud, that these ballots could be run through.
Of course, the postal workers are not fully vaccinated because they're actually exempt from the vaccinations, so they wouldn't have to worry about that either, presumably. There's a whole lot going on with this in Olmsted County. You found a large number of missing absentee. I mean, the Secretary Simon reports that there's a large number of missing absentee ballots.
Well, I wouldn't say he reports it. His data shows at that time that there's 1,500 not connected. His data also shows that 5 people died before October 20th when they cast an absentee ballot. There are also 25 people who voted more than once within Olmsted County.
How many people voted more than once in Olmsted County?
25.
Well, that's voter fraud, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be.
Technically, so if you vote more than once, do we know the names of these people?
We do. And so we
That's
will.
Astonishing.
Right.
At some point, would you want someone like myself to go look at their properties and
No,
maybe
what we would prefer to do is we would like to gently ask the county auditor or whoever the elections official is. We will show them the data of the different periods that voter showed up more than once from multiple data sets. Because I have 9 data sets, I'm able to confirm that it wasn't the way I loaded the data, because it shows up in multiple frames, if you will. And so it wasn't a stutter step in one data load. It shows up on multiple dates. And so we would want to sit down with the county auditor, and they may tell us a story of ones that they did catch, which is great. We would want to ask follow-up questions about these ones, but also about those previous ones, such as, did you then turn these over to the county auditor for prosecution? And then we'd want to follow up on each of those cases. So we want to be mentoring and encouraging with the counties as much as possible. But if they choose not to do the enforcement actions or discovery, because I mean, this could have been a data entry issue. And so I'm open to that type of discovery. And so that's why we don't want to make accusations just flat out, but we want to basically sit down with the county auditor and say, all right, what is this? And so that's definitely a role that your team can certainly play down there. And we prefer to have local activists help us in that discovery, because it is your county, and we want you to treat it with what you know of your county commissioners as well as your county auditor, and be respectful of that.
We'll do that. And I'm wondering, so if somebody lost their election by, say, 900 votes, and you have this of the people, let me phrase this a different way. For the people who voted, those 25 people who voted more than once in Olmsted County, how many times did they potentially vote? Was it twice? Because that could be a mistake.
Yeah, most of those was twice. There's one voter in Minnesota that did accomplish it 4 times. And we're following up on that one still.
Seems more normal, because if somebody's actually doing voter fraud on the level that was going on, say, in another part of Minnesota, you had people like harvesting ballots and doing a lot of nonsense.
And we also see that some people voted absentee and also at the precinct. And so there is a little bit of a discussion of, did Trump create that problem of people not trusting the absentee, but also try to show up and vote at the precincts? And so we want to make sure that we're careful of that and kind of understanding. And so in a bipartisan way, that is definitely a case. And so both Democrats and Republicans heard that message. And so I'm kind of wondering if that was kind of an equal type of fault, that people may have done that. And so it was missed by the county auditor. So still something in the system was broken to prevent that. Because if you voted absentee, what is supposed to happen at the precinct level is they're supposed to recognize that and then prevent the voter from voting again. However, let's put the asterisk here. They were receiving absentee ballots from the 3rd all the way through the 10th. And if those poll books are only updated on November 2nd, you still would have had a potential of all these days after the fact that the voter could have still participated in with a ballot.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where it gets really dystopia.
Yeah. So this concept of having absentee ballots created issues that were dimensional, multifaceted. Right. Yeah.
And so this is also the issue of that separation between what in the past, what would happen is that the absentee ballots would come back to the precincts and then they would sort through all of those absentee ballots after the polls closed and then count them after the polls closed. Well, no, we have testimony from Hennepin County that states that they started counting absentee ballots 46 days before the election. And other counties started 14 or 7 days before the election to start counting the absentee ballots. And so this is where we kind of get this weird process in Minnesota that creates these errors and issues.
I'm wondering, is it okay for example, is it okay for the mayor of a town, let's just keep this general, not specific to anybody here or there, but is it okay for a politician, let's say a representative or a senator or somebody who has a stake in the election, is it okay for them to go to a polling station and participate in the polling process as an election? I mean, can they be on site and working in a polling station? If it's okay, that's good.
I'm not sure of the laws on that, but as a former elected official, I would steer clear from it just because on the suspicion of your opponents and even supporters, it would look off-putting. And even just at a bare minimum, I wouldn't recommend it of any politician to do that.
Yeah,
You
I
really
would do.
should stay away and just kind of respect the system. And then typically that's how most politicians react in those type of environments.
Yeah,
So I just don't really like it. But one of the things that we are doing is we're starting to do kind of a digital canvas of the state of Minnesota, and other folks have created this election data analysis system that's been kind of going around the country. And I'm working on data for South Dakota and Minnesota and leading up both of those teams. And in the next few weeks, we'll have some interesting uh,
yeah.
results for each of the counties and then each of the kind of larger cities as well, just to kind of go in. But it was kind of interesting as I was kind of looking through some of them. I was surprised at some of the folks that were voting because I was like, wow, I thought traditionally they may not have voted because of religious principles. So when I looked at in your area, for example, 170 Good Counsel Drive, that's the School of Sisters of Notre Dame, and 115 people there voted, and I was impressed by that because you hear of so many churches trying to steer people away from political activity. And I think it's a good thing that, we do see some participation out there that people fundamentally are able to express their right to who they want to govern them. And
Good.
so I'll applaud the churches for that that I've seen so far.
The only reason I would have asked that question is because there's been anecdotal stories here in Rochester about politicians going to polls and being there for quite a while and trying to work the polls on election day. But we'll wait and see if those people come forward with their own stories. That's all on me. That's not a reflection on what we're discussing here today.
Yep, I've got
But
some other fun stuff for you too, which is really interesting. So when we look
okay.
at the absentee voters, what blew me away is that you'll love this one. So we had somehow remarkably 1,439 absentee voters register after the day of the election.
No, I don't under are you telling me how many they registered after the day of election? They registered
Yep, so 1,439.
in why is that okay?
Well, that's what we want to find out. But don't worry. One of the
Okay.
phenomenal facts is
Don't
that
worry.
2,232 additional voters who voted absentee registered on the day of the election.
So 232 additional voters registered
2,232.
2,232 additional voters registered on the day of the election.
Yep. This,
Why is that okay? That just
this is
seems
why,
crazy.
this is how I can tell you with these absentee numbers, no, unequivocally, things were not okay.
And so is there a possibility that some of these people are migrating from state to state or from city to city within Minnesota
Oh,
and voting?
I don't even care
No.
about that.
Okay.
What I do care about though is the fantastic ability to somehow vote absentee on the day of election. If you're
Oh,
registering to vote and then you're going
so
to absentee vote. So you
that's
literally showed
another
up
level of
somewhere.
shenanigans. It's
Yeah.
tomfoolery.
Yeah.
Oh,
So in
that's
Olmsted County, we have 3,671 people that voted on election day or afterwards and cast an absentee ballot.
no. Okay, can you say that again like I'm 5 years old? Say that
Okay.
again. People are not gonna believe. Okay, go. Sorry.
So we had people who cast absentee ballots who registered to vote on election day and after election day, and that number is 3,671
In Olmsted County.
in Olmsted County alone.
And so in Olmsted County, in addition, so how many total voters are there in Olmsted County? Actual registered voters as of how
Well,
many?
that cast a ballot
91?
was like 91,000, but the absentee
Depends
number
on.
was like 50,000 something.
So sometimes, so there's people that are registered and then they're registered again. They vote on election day. They also filled out an absentee ballot.
Right.
So the total number of potential registered voters should be in the neighborhood of 91,000 people in a
Yep.
county with 162,000 and change
Yep.
individuals.
Yep.
91,000 can vote, and suddenly, no. So what's the potential percentage of votes that could be lousy? The outside seems to me like we're getting closer to 10,000 votes.
We
You know,
are getting closer to 10,000. It's we're really close. So when we start adding up all the different things that are happening, we will see that. And so, for example, one of the other analyses that we're looking at is we see some potential issues because remember when I talked about the Sisters of Notre Dame? Only 46 of them use the main building number as the phone number when they have their voter registration.
okay.
And so somehow 46 of them don't have their own phone number assigned to them. And so that's another analysis that we're looking at is how many people are using the same phone numbers.
Oh, interesting. Well, in that facility, it may be likely that a lot of the sisters share. They may not have a cell phone. They're on
Right.
fixed incomes.
Yep.
They would use the shared, the main line
Yep.
as their phone number.
Yep.
But for other nursing homes, that presents a problem, doesn't it?
It does. As well as, say, college students too.
College students. And there's an issue with University of Minnesota. University of Minnesota, the Winona campus is here. St.
Right.
Mary's campus is here. There's also an Augsburg College here.
Right.
So,
and so those are other areas where we've seen people register to vote out of the quote unquote student unions or the bookstore are creative addresses that we see.
Did anybody register to vote out of the student lounge, which is a property near Broadway?
To be determined.
Oh, boy. You have some treats in store for us on January 19th when Mr. Rick Weible comes to Rochester, Minnesota to talk about all these election shenanigans.
Yep.
Going to be inside the belly of the beast here in Rochester, Minnesota. The Midwest Swamp Watch.
Yep.
Thank you for all you do, Rick.
And also, we'll have Susan with us as well, so we'll give an update on the legal process as well. And just her experience is an interesting story as well. I've kind of had, I'll say, a backseat to it, but I've been in the vehicle with her. She has suffered greatly throughout this process, personally, professionally, and she has endured a lot. And so hats off to Susan and the continued fight and the legal battles that she has gone through. There's going to be some breaking news over the next 30 days, I'll say, and I think people are going to be stunned when they read it. So
yes, when all of that comes out, we're going to do everything we can to disseminate it inside Olmsted County, because we were told, we were all assured by numerous individuals many times that everything is super duper for cereals, all rock and roll good in Olmsted County.
It's not, and I think that we're looking into the future too, and it's not giving me a comfortable feeling for Olmsted County, because we are seeing significant movement of voters throughout the state of Minnesota. And I'm just so I'm going to pull up one of these things here where I was looking at one of the races down in your area, and I was shocked to see how many people were moving in. So I believe, yeah, so Carla Nelson, she, let's see here, her separation was 909 votes, right?
Yeah.
As of January 1 through September 26th so far of 2021, there's 5,752 new voters in your that have moved into your area.
I wonder where these people come from, because there's certainly, I mean, there
We
are
actually,
jobs, but why would somebody move during an economic crisis when everything's shut down due to COVID and opportunities are lost? And all of a sudden, how many? 5,000 something
yep,
move
5,700.
into
Yep.
Olmsted County, move into Rochester? Where
Yep.
are these people coming from potentially? Do we
And
know?
so we do know, and so we'll work with the BPOUs and local activists to share that information. They just have to contact me.
Excellent.
Another one is when we look at David Senjum down there as well. His vote separation was 1238, and there are 5,400 new voters in that district.
5,400?
Yep.
There's not enough homes for that many people.
There's been a
There's
lot of transition. So between the students and retirees and the stack and pack housing, you are seeing significant movement in Olmsted County. And I don't think I don't think a lot of people understood what has happened down there and how the population shifts. We
Mhm.
so the parties, I encourage them to send out welcome letters to these new voters so that they can find out what kind of voters they are, and but also encourage them to show up for February 2nd's caucus night, so that way they can get engaged in politics and be connected right away.
February 2nd is caucus night. We
Yep.
hope that we'll see all the candidates coming through, and January 19th, Rick Weible of the Midwest Swamp Watch. You could reach him at midwestswampwatch.com. He has a YouTube channel called Midwest Swamp Watch, oddly enough. Yeah, Rick, we cannot wait to hear all of the tidbits and details that you're saving for the time when you arrive in town, because it's going to be just in time for caucuses, and we'll do whatever we can to get as many people there that night, and then also share out information about the caucuses where everybody can go, because something's wrong. We're told everything's okay and we're just supposed to vote and go home, or stay home and vote. I don't know which it is. It's hard to keep track. But Rick, this has been fun. And Rick, thank you so much for your research. And the work that Rick does needs to be supported, everybody. So if you're concerned about this this issue is the most important thing. You can knock on doors, you can put a bumper sticker on your car, but unless I think the Romans said that there's Marx or someone said it's not the election that counts, it's who counts the votes that count. I screwed that one up, but
That's all right. We'll receive.
up too, so I think it's okay. It's all
Right.
good. We're through the looking glass on this stuff.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. White. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, talk to you next time.
All right, sounds good.
Bye.
Yep. Take care, everybody.